Welcome to Common Ground, conversations shaping the UK-India relationship and future. My name is Lakshmi Kaul, and I'm bringing you the UK-India series for Global Order. Our guest today is someone who exemplifies the very definition of being a global citizen. With a dynamic portfolio spanning fintech, PropTech, recruitment tech, and edtech, he's at the forefront of innovation, building transformative ventures that reshape industries. He advises governments and prominent global corporations, helping them craft seamless digital experiences that drive impact. His deep passion for real estate investment has led him to acquire properties across 12 cities worldwide, giving him an unparalleled insight into the global market trend. Based out of Singapore, but mostly found traveling the globe, he is an entrepreneur and investor. In his past life, he's been an actor, presenter, with a keen interest in geopolitics, economics, and technology. I'm thrilled to be welcoming my dear friend Abhii Dabas. Great to have you join us, Abhi. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Thanks for having me.
So, you're an Indian national living in Singapore, and you've had a keen interest in countries around the world, having traveled to perhaps most of them. First of all, I want to know how many countries have you not seen yet? And second of all, which are the most investment friendly countries today?
Obviously there are countries you want to visit and there are countries you have no plans on visiting. So I think the countries that I do want to visit, I think there are still about 6 or 7 to go. And then as I like to define my travel framework, I say phase one and phase two. So phase one is see the world, see as many places as possible so that you know for yourself, not through other people's experiences, but your own experiences where you would like to spend more time in. And then phase two, which started a few years ago, is where you start spending more time. So instead of spending days, you spend weeks. Instead of spending weeks, you spend months in countries that you really, really enjoy. So I think now I'm trying to balance both phase one and phase two. In terms of which are the investment friendly countries, I think the world is gravitating towards wealth hubs. The world is gravitating towards countries which are tax efficient because tax is a huge, thing to consider, especially if you're in Western Europe or if you're in the US. Indian taxes are still relatively lower. Some people might disagree, but relatively speaking. So a lot of wealth is concentrating in wealth hubs. And of course, there are lifestyle and retiree investors who are always looking to optimize their lifestyles as well. So yeah, there are quite a few interesting destinations. You see Italy coming up as a wealthy people's favorite. Portugal has been popular for a long time. Singapore, Dubai, Hong Kong have always been popular. And of course, Southeast Asia. So if you're looking for retirement and an inexpensive retirement, then Southeast Asian options are always popular.
Wow, that's great analysis. So, what do people get most wrong about markets currently? What are they getting wrong right now?
Well, the first thing to remember is markets are no longer a good barometer. Well, the good thing to note here is markets are no longer a good barometer of where society and economy is because a very small percentage of people invest in companies. If you see a lot of companies, some of the biggest tech companies, they remain private for much longer. So retail investors don't get to participate. So, money is circulating in a very few hands. And so I know there's been a huge trend recently of retail trading, but if you actually look at how many people generate profits through that, the number is quite small. So I think one thing we have to understand is just by looking at the markets, you cannot tell what the state of the economy is or what the state of the society is. And if you really want to understand the health of a country or a city, you have to look at how small businesses are doing. And that is one thing that I always tell people to look at. When you look at, say, real estate, you actually go to a city, you see the energy there, how many people are actually building businesses, how many people are trying to do new things, how many people are moving into those cities. That's a much more accurate, indicator of how those countries or cities are doing rather than how the stock markets are.
Sure. So the US, China, Europe, Middle East geopolitics, they're pretty heavily shaping investment decisions for people today. With that never ending tension around the world, the economic upheaval and uncertainty that follows, it has seemed to become the way of life now. How do you reckon one protect their investments through such turbulent times?
Well, diversification used to be a luxury. It's a necessity now. So that's the number one thing that I would like to say. So people used to think it's only for very wealthy people to have diversification in terms of sectors, asset classes. Now, geographical diversification And of course, asset class diversification is very, very important. You see how quickly things change. So the US always used to be a very inward looking market in terms of, say, real estate investments. But if you look at 2025, you'll see the Americans have been some of the biggest investors in countries like Portugal, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, Italy again. And so things are changing. I mean, there are different driving forces for that. The Chinese have always been a very active outbound investors. So that continues to be the case. In fact, there is a bit of a reverse trend now because there is a lot more innovation. So, we even know people who are now setting up businesses in China because they feel there are more opportunities, especially for tech. And if you want to push the boundaries. So these trends are always changing. What we have to do is just continue to adapt, and we have to make sure that diversification is very integral to how we lead our lives, because the days of I'll start this job, do this for 25 years, and one day I'll retire and probably go to the foothills of the Himalayas. Those days are gone now. So you have to be nimble. You have to be ready for things to go wrong. Things do go wrong. One day you wake up, you think the world's a bit more peaceful. The next day, all hell breaks loose. And so the things are unstable. I think we have entered the age of instability. Not that it should be the case, but we are so used to living in stable times that we have to prepare for this new reality.
Yeah, sure. But I'm wondering the generation that we come from. I mean, I know that we are the same age. We've seen our parents invest a lot of emotional and financial energy into buying their first family home and perhaps the only home. And we've been instilled with that whole aspiration of being debt free and buying your own home. Do you think that buying behavior within, especially the real estate market, has changed now? What has been the transition since, over the last couple of decades, 3 decades?
I think there have been massive changes, not only in the real estate industry, but otherwise consumer spending as well. So debt in itself is not a bad thing or a good thing. There's good debt and there's bad debt. So if you're getting debt to sponsor your lifestyle or buying liabilities or very expensive cars, then it can be bad debt. If you're leveraging to buy assets and those assets produce returns higher than what you are paying the banks, then it's really good debt. Now, if you look at billionaires, they don't draw salaries because salaries are taxable, but they pay themselves in dividends, and they obviously they do portfolio lending, and there are a lot of other ways that you can actually reduce your tax liabilities. So I think we have to have a healthy and honest relationship with debt. So as long as debt does not fuel lifestyle that you cannot sustain, and it's allowing you to take bigger risks in your business and your investments, then I think it's a great thing. So we do see now, obviously, with a lot of consumerism, that credit card debts, which used to be a very alien phenomena to us in these parts of the world, now is becoming more prevalent. People are spending beyond their means, and then that puts a lot of pressure on them. And then that has a bit of a vicious cycle effect on them not enjoying their jobs, because then they feel this job's not paying me enough, so I need to do something more. Then they try to do gigs, then gigs are not always profitable or not very consistent. So, it just starts a bit of a vicious cycle. So the idea is to try and stay away from bad debt. And early in your career and in your business, if you can start taking some debt, because that's also good for your credit rating and your credit worthiness, it's really important. And then you invest that in assets, then, your assets will continue to grow. And assets in the last 20 years or so have grown at a much, much, much faster rate than salaries or incomes have. And so that's the way to create real.
Yeah, I'm thinking so because we're talking about a lot of UK India investments as well on this show, generally getting a read of the UK India corridor. I'm wondering what your assessment of UK and India markets are, because I believe you have investments in both countries. I mean, you come from India. So what is your understanding of or reading of the UK and India markets?
I think both are very exciting markets for very different reasons. So India is obviously probably the fastest growing market anywhere globally. The population is still growing, although at a slower pace. Economy is growing. You go across the world and you see the sentiment is very different. And then you come to India and you see this energy, which is incredible. So I think India is a great place to invest. The only thing to keep in mind in India is, what are you investing for? So, I mean, before we make any investments, we have to ask ourselves, what are our objectives? Are we doing it for capital growth? Are we doing it for lifestyle? Are we doing it for high yields? And we have to be clear about what our objectives are. So sometimes you buy something, you go to the mountains, you absolutely fall in love with that place. You're not thinking about whether it's a 4% yield or a 5% yield, you just want to spend time there. And India is a great place in terms of capital growth. So that's a great opportunity. I would say probably the best place in the world to invest right now is India. But because India is a complex market, you have to do a lot of due diligence. You have to make sure you know what you're getting into. Then of course there are some hidden costs and hidden disadvantages. So for instance, if you lead a global life, then even if in India you're making 40%, 50% returns over the say 5-year period, you have to see how the currency is doing. So if your expenses are in another country, then maybe you have not made that much returns. All these things have to be factored in. And then the UK is exciting for a different reason. One, very strong rule of law. The chances of you getting cheated out of an investment or something going terribly wrong are lower. I mean, not zero, but definitely lower. There are some protections for investors as well. One thing that people don't realize sometimes in Asia is the UK is very easy to get finance. So if you're buying a property in the UK, you can get finance for that property. So that can give you leverage returns as well. Higher yields than most of European Union and a lot of other places in the world. It's still, I would say, landlord friendly market, although there have been some changes in regulation recently. But I think by and large, still a good market. So again, you have to be very specific. You have to do your due diligence. You have to see you're investing in a regeneration zone or a growth corridor. But I think it's a good place to earn good yields and have stable passive income if that's your objective. But if you want to see 60, 80, 100, 200% capital growth, then India is the place to be.
Yeah, two of very, very different markets as such. So we've talked about investment, but one needs to understand what is a good framework for evaluating a property investment. So, from your experience of investing across the globe, what would you say is a good framework for evaluating a reasonable or a good property investment?
Well, my framework developed because I've made every mistake possible in the book. I have bought properties that were never delivered. I bought properties that were delivered but looked nothing like what was promised, where the yields were so much lower than what was promised. So over the years, I've developed a bit of a framework for myself. So again, first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is objectives. You have to be very clear about why you're buying this. So as long as your objective is clear, you will not feel disappointed. So if you're buying something in Thailand or Cambodia or the Philippines or say any other Georgia or any other emerging market, then you will not be disappointed with, say, the construction quality, for instance. So you have to be very clear about why you're buying this. So few things to keep in mind. I think firstly, once your objective is clear, you decide capital growth or yield. It could be a combination of both. But then you have to be clear about what you're expecting. Is it 8% capital growth? Is it 4% yield? So that's 12% yield annually, or is it something else? India tends to have lower yields, but capital growth is higher. So if you're, let's say, at a later stage in your life and you want passive income, then maybe India is not the market for you. Or residential real estate is probably not the asset class for you. Maybe you should look at commercial. So, and then you have to again look at currency. You have to look at payment terms, because what people sometimes don't realize is, let's say if you're buying from a developer an off plan or under construction project, then how quickly are you paying the money? So are you paying everything within the first 15 months or most of it? Then there is a loss of interest on that payment as well. And what are the protections and safeguards that you have? So I think once you look at all of these things in clarity, it really helps. And the final thing is taxes, which is something people don't think about. People think, I buy this, my rent is 1 lakh or 2 lakh or let's say £2,000. But what they don't realize is, what are the rental income taxes like? How many properties do you have? Which income tax bracket or slab do you fall in? And so that would have a big impact. And then, of course, finally, the capital gains tax. So you've done really well while buying a property, but then once you sell it, then how much of your capital gains do you have to pay as taxes? Also in India, people should be, it'll be important for people to understand that the UK has inheritance taxes. So there are some complexities there as well. And if somebody's older, they should probably look into all those things before they go ahead and invest. But once you do that, you get a good sense of what your net gains are going to be after capital gains, after rental income tax, and then you will make a sensible and a more well-informed decision.
What would be a typical set of mistakes that a first time buyer will end up making, and what can you caution them against?
Great question. It's a long list, but what I can say is, again, I come back to the same point. When I speak with investors who are just getting started on the journey, I ask them the same question: why are you buying this? And most of the times, I'm surprised and not really surprised that they are very confused about their objectives. They say they combine a few things. I would like for it to make money and the rent should be good as well. But also, I love spending some time there. So, first, we have to get the emotion out of this. If you're buying something for rental yields, you would not live there. So that means you're renting that out. If you're buying something for high capital growth, then you have to forget about, say, high rental yield. And if you're buying something for lifestyle, you probably have to forget about all the other factors. So I think just having that clarity is very important. Then, of course, real estate is very, very micro market driven. So you cannot say, oh, it's a good time to buy in Mumbai. Where in Mumbai? It's a good time to buy in London. Where in London? So there are markets that are doing well. You have to look at what the government plans are. What's the policy like? What's the upcoming infrastructure? There's a lot of regeneration zones in the UK, for instance. What's the transport infrastructure like? Is industry moving there or not moving? So I see a very common trend as people who don't do the research. So somebody would just understand from somebody else, oh, Manchester is a great market to invest in, and they go and buy something in Manchester. The time it takes them to make that decision is probably a long enough time for Manchester to not be so favorable. So if somebody was buying in Manchester in 2021, and then you look at your friend and you say, wow, Manchester is good, maybe next year we should buy it. 1 year is a long time. So we were buying properties at 2% interest rates in 2021, 22, and now we are looking at 6% interest rates. So your entire math can go out of the window if you don't plan these things carefully. Yeah, I think if I had to sum it up, one, be clear about your objectives. Second, due diligence on the developer if you're buying off plan. Three, understand the micro markets. Always get a feel for the place, see what the drivers are. And four, be very, very clear about what your net returns are going to be. So sometimes you could be living in a luxury condo where you buy something which is spectacular, but the service charges are so high that your net rental income is really low. So, sometimes we discourage people from buying in, ultra luxury projects or something because the net yields are not as high, or even though gross yields can be very high. So some of these things will help people avoid some of the mistakes. Yeah, hopefully.
So the PropTech platform that you built, I understand that it brings together all of these complexities, addresses them, and is almost like a one-stop shop kind of place. So tell us what is so exciting about this platform, and why is everyone getting so excited about the PropTech platform of yours?
Yeah, I know. I started this as a bit of a passion project, so I'm quite pleasantly surprised by how well received it's been, and from around the world, the amount of progress we've been able to make in a short span of time. So the platform's called INTRIC. INTRIC stands for Intelligent Real Estate Investment Club. Basically, I built it because I was frustrated as a nomadic investor. So for the last 20 years, all I do is I go to different countries. I think I would have probably went to 40, 45 countries to actually actively look at property development. So I've sat down with developers, agencies, warehouse owners, looked at, all kinds of investments, retail, commercial, logistics, agricultural, residential, of course. And I just realized that in this day and age, there is no platform that offers you access to global supply. How could that be? You in this day and age when it's so easy, you can go and buy any exchange traded fund in the US, in Latin America, emerging market fund in China, in Hong Kong, but you can't buy property. And I just found it to be a really bizarre thing. And secondly, let's say, even if you can find out, let's say if you want to buy something in Poland, you go to a property website in Poland, not very difficult to find. And then you see a listing by an agent. You don't know that agent. You know nothing about that market. Would you develop that trust to buy from that agent? So then I realized it's more than just discovery. So we said, if we have to build something, it has to be built at scale. It has to be built as a truly global platform, and it should address all these problems that overseas investors face. So we say there are 5 steps in the journey of an overseas cross-border investor. We said discover, analyze, trust, invest, and manage. Because even if you buy something beautiful in Romania, really interesting market, who will manage that property for you? If somebody's calling you at 1 a.m., India time and saying the mattress needs to be changed, you will suddenly start hating your own investment, right? So, how do you prevent all of those things? So, you have to look at each of these things. How do you build that trust? So, we work with some of the best providers globally, some of the most renowned brands. We do a lot of due diligence so people can know, they can feel that confidence that one, they will get all the information, they have all the tools, they have all the research, and then of course they are working with the most trusted providers, and then we help them invest and then manage those properties as well through our partners. So they will manage their properties so you can collect your passive income. You see your property portfolio grow around the world without having to do too much or without having to worry too much. So that's what the platform's like. And the last bit I would say, why it's called club. The public URL is intric.club. And that's because we just wanted to build a community. Like I said, I started this off as a bit of a passion project. I said I'll get 100 people who are as obsessed about nomadic property investment as I am, and we can exchange notes and learn from each other's experience. So I could talk to people about, say, 8 countries or 10 countries where I have a lot of active experience in, but there could be 20 other countries that I don't have any experience in. So we can learn from each other. And there's no better way to learn than from each other rather than a developer telling you what you should buy from them. So we've tried to combine a lot of these things, and so far, so good. Now we have developments from about 25 countries, and that number is likely to go up to about 50 countries by the end of next quarter. So exciting.
The truly connected platform. So, what have you learned in the last few months of having developed, or as you're developing this platform and network and building the club? What have been your biggest learnings through this journey?
Yeah, I mean, so many things, right? I mean, this is obviously not my first venture. So, as I said, somebody introduced me at an event recently and said, our next expert is Abhii Dabas. And I said, Abhii Dabas is an expert. You're absolutely right, but an expert at failures. I've had more failures than anyone in this room. So I think there are a lot of things that you learn about building ventures. And some of the things that I've learned from my past experiences, and of course, the current one is firstly, we have to find that product market fit before you build something, because I've made this mistake because I love building stuff. So I've built many products and then gone around looking for a problem that it will solve. So first we have to see there is a problem worth solving, and then we build something. So that's what we did differently this time. So that was one. The second thing is, in cross-border real estate, what I realized was the biggest limitation was human beings. Now that's a weird thing to say, but the fact is, and not that human beings want to be a limitation or a hurdle, but the fact is, if let's say you want to buy something in Brazil, now, very different culture. What you expect in terms of customer service would be very different from what they can offer. Languages can be tricky. Then, of course, legal frameworks, all of those things. Why you might expect somebody to call you anytime on a Sunday afternoon, but somebody in some country may say, I'll get back to you in 6 business days, or they may not even come back to you. So we just realized that if we empower people who are really global in their mindset, and we empower them with all the AI tools that are available now, then that solves the problem. So, and the fact that if you want to get started on your journey, the first thing you have to do is research. You need to know where you want to buy. So that research does not have to be dependent on human beings as well. So we publish a lot of research reports. We have a lot of investment guides. So those are some of the things, it's just, and the usual challenges of building a community, working with people from around the world. And so, yeah, lessons to be learned. And it's been really exciting as well.
Interesting. So, I want to talk about AI and advanced tech. You've talked about some of the benefits of using tech and advanced tech in the business, but tell me how you're using it across your businesses, and how do you see it evolving over a period of time, say in the next decade or 2 decades, in future applications?
Well, firstly, I'm not somebody who gets very enamored by any shiny object. So let me start by saying that, because people catch on a buzzword, and a few years ago it was blockchain, and then it was sustainability, and now people are saying AI. Is it real or is it not real? But I do feel this is different. I do feel that AI cannot be a feature. No matter what we are doing in our lives, in our careers, in our business, our approaches. I just had a meeting with somebody, and they've been building a software as a service platform, and they've been struggling. So my recommendation to them was dismantle everything and rebuild it as an AI native solution. And that's not to say, wow, this is the cool thing to talk about, so let's just build it that way. No, the fact is, what would take 10 people 10 months to build now takes 2 people 10 days to build. That's the power of AI. So not only are we talking about what can be done today, but in future, if you want to scale that business, you want to add a lot of dimensions, new modules, new business dimensions and features to your venture, it's easier to add. And also the fact with AI, it's becoming so easy to build things that your competition will, come out of nowhere. When you expect nobody to be competing with you, you'll see 10 competitors. So you have to move even faster. So you cannot be working in 2026 as if it was 2021. And things are evolving really fast. So I think it's exciting, it's scary, but you have to truly embrace it and you have to build your businesses with AI, native AI. And when I say native AI, means that the business and the organization both have to be AI native. So you have to work with agents who are AI agents, just like you'd work with your colleagues. So in the last 10 days, we have created 92 AI agents who now work with us. So who understand me. The joke is sometimes they understand you better than your friends do or your spouse does or anybody else does. But the fact is they are efficient. You have to obviously train them and they improve and they get better. But this is the most exciting time to be alive if you're an entrepreneur or if you're somebody who has a lot of ideas, because AI really, really does enable you to do amazing.
So we are going to see a world where traditional marriages are out of the window and cross-tech marriages are the way forward.
Well,
So
sometimes if you are speaking to AI on the voice mode, that can cause some friction in certain relationships as well, because people are always wondering, who on earth are you always talking to? Or somebody may look at me sometimes from a distance and think that I've lost my marbles because I'm just talking into a phone all the time, and I get really engrossed. But it's wonderful. It's like you are surrounded by some of the smartest people, in every industry, and you can learn from them and you can work with them. And if you use AI properly, and I'm just talking beyond the chat GPTs and Gemini of the world, when AI really becomes an agent and not just a chatbot, then that becomes very empowering. So, I used to find it difficult sometimes because I had so many ideas. So over the weekend, I have many ideas. Then I would tell my team the ideas on Monday mornings, and they obviously have a million other things to do. And they must be thinking, this guy's crazy. He keeps coming up with all these ideas. But now I don't need to tell them all those ideas. By the time I meet them on Monday, I've already created prototypes with my AI agents. So it's exciting. It's inspiring, and you can do a lot more.
so your colleagues are working in peace now thanks to AI.
I'm asking them to push their boundaries and make AI a part of their lives. And I must say that, our teams, some of them have been with us for, 6 years, 7 years, even longer. I have never seen them enjoy their work so much. And the other point that I want to make is some people will be left behind, but, it's something that we can fully control. So embrace AI, make it a part of your life, let it make you more effective rather than avoiding it as a dreadful thing, because then you will be left behind. And it's easy, it's very easy to adopt. So I was never a programmer, and I thought that was a limitation considering that I've been building digital ventures. But now I don't have to. Now I can vibe code, I can do a lot of things. I do some basic coding myself, which I never thought I could do. And I'm terrible at that as well. But with AI now, it just becomes so much easier. So you can do so much more. If most of us feel that there is so much more we can do. We have so much untapped potential. And I think AI is a great way to just realize some of that potential.
To collaboration as opposed to competition, I guess, with technology.
So
So you love to travel, and I know that the one thing that is very constant in your life is your passion for traveling to various places. In fact, you've actively advocated for a work from anywhere philosophy. Companies have, they went into that whole mode of working remotely and hybrid working and things like that. But then now you see a lot of companies have switched back into work in office kind of. From your experience, because you've delivered some high pressure projects, is it really possible to deliver high pressure projects with tight deadlines while working from anywhere? And how do you then monitor progress?
yeah, great question. And I am a big advocate, as you said, of work from anywhere lifestyle. I think it broadens your horizons. You learn a lot from different cultures. You see how different countries work, their strengths. Some countries are very good at innovation, pushing boundaries. Some countries are very good at disciplined work. Some countries and cultures are really good at problem solving. So you can learn a lot from different cultures, different work cultures as well. So I strongly recommend that. I have been a big believer and evangelist of, engineer your life. So whatever life you want. So a few years ago, I went from working 18 hours a day to 2 hours a week. And then I enjoyed that for a while, but then I got bored and then I built another venture. But the fact is, it's possible. And I was, generating the same amount of revenue by doing those 2 hours a week work that I was when I was doing 18 hours a day of work as well. So anything's possible. I really believe that you have to very consciously start engineering that life. And when it comes to projects, I think there are two aspects of this. So you can work very well together with each other. Here you are, and here I am in two different countries. We are doing this. Hopefully, some people find this conversation useful. We don't have to be in the same city. The one thing I do believe, and which is what we do, is when you are building something new, when you're creating something new, that's the time that I feel it really helps to be together in person, because great things come out of people bouncing ideas off each other and pushing each other back and challenging each other. And that's difficult to do on these virtual meetings and all of those things. So what we normally do is, wherever our teams are, every month or every 2 months, we'll block some time, 5 days, 4 days, and we spend that week together. We build something quite exciting. We end up doing a lot more creative work in those 1 or 2 weeks. And then that keeps us going for the next 3 to 4 months. Then we can do that again. And so that really helps. So if you're building something new, nothing amazing was built over a virtual call, I can tell you that. But it can be executed. So when it comes to timelines and pressure, all that can be managed. But when you're building something new, you really need to, and I'm not saying that it can't be done, but it's not as enjoyable. It's not as enjoyable as people, in the same space, challenging each other. And some of the most creative work happens when we are together. So, and of course, there's great value for your own mental health in terms of being with people, so you don't feel like you're alone building things. And because building new ventures and new products can be quite a lonely pursuit sometimes, so you have to make sure you have the right people who are working with you. So I think if you can find that balance, then yeah, you can live in 40 different countries in a year and still make as much money as you want.
So the current generation, keeps talking about, I'm glad that you mentioned the mental health aspect and the social isolation that tech advancement brings with it. The more connected we are, we seem to be socially more isolated. So, how does one maintain that balance? And how do you establish that balance for yourself as an individual, as a business owner, as a colleague? And what do you do to make sure that your marbles aren't all over the place and you center yourself? How do you do that?
Well, firstly, we have to acknowledge work is not life. Work is a part of life. So you have to focus on overall growth. I always believe if we are growth oriented, you can grow in different aspects in your life. So sometimes your career is stagnant. You can grow emotionally, you can grow spiritually, you can grow personally, right? So because you can't always control the pace at which you will grow. Maybe you are brilliant, but the organization that you're working in is stagnant. So there's not much you can do. You can't switch jobs every week or every month. Maybe the organization is brilliant as well, but the sector is stagnating. Maybe the sector is doing really well, but there are some other geopolitical factors that have come in the way. So there's only so much we can do. So I think the first thing is to just, love ourselves and just say there's more to me than just work, right? So that's not the only way to define ourselves. So as long as you are adding value to society, friends, family, yourself, then I think it's a great way to live. Now, when it comes to mental health and working in isolation, I think this generation has really had it tough because COVID didn't help, all these virtual meetings didn't help. I heard a term recently called hyper novelty, if I'm getting it right, which means when the pace of change is so high that we can't keep up with it. So things have always changed a lot, right, over the centuries. But now things change in a matter of weeks. So a company does their IPO. It's the most exciting technology. 3 weeks later, somebody builds something that makes that earlier company irrelevant. Now, how do you live in a world where the pace of change is so crazy? So the best way is, again, I focus on the fact that one thing that we all need, no matter what happens, is money. So we have to be honest. We have to have a good, healthy relationship with money. We have to say, I need to make X amount of money. And it's not about you have to chase money. You have to be very, very honest with yourself. So you say, money is important for me from a lifestyle point of view. So you can say, okay, if I don't want to chase money, then I need to make sure that my cost of living is a certain amount, right? So there are plenty of inexpensive places in the world that you can live, on less than $1,000. And so sometimes people live in big cities, they are not enjoying their jobs, so they make 3 lakh, but then they are spending 3,50,000, and there's no joy. So you have to be true to yourself and say, what is it that you really value? I've always looked at what's important for me, and I focus on those things rather than worry about what success is in somebody else's life, or, what's their definition of success. So I think for young people, I always say build a community, don't do it alone, and not online communities. Actually go and meet people. Travel again is a good way. Sometimes I'll be feeling bored in a city and I feel I need the energy. So I'll go to one of the emerging nomad hubs, and I meet a lot of young smart people, and that inspires me. Their stories inspire me. You meet people, I end up solving some of their problems, so that gives me a sense of purpose as well. Sometimes we get too uh, occupied with our little problems. We don't realize people overcome such massive problems. Some people, sometimes I am traveling, I've met people who've told me stories of growing up, in war zones, and, how they had to hide under the bed or go to the bunker as kids. And then it's so difficult with some countries, so difficult to get out of your country. Your passport does not allow you to go and travel or live in other countries. So people have overcome so much. And so, when we speak with all these people, it gives you that sense of gratitude. You just realize how good your life is. And so, yeah, some of the things that I tell young people is, one, you can engineer life. Anything is possible. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter, how good you were in school or what you studied, or did you study biology and now you're doing logistics. Doesn't matter. Be clear with about your goals. Set your goals, and goals don't mean anything without timelines, and then work backwards to achieve those goals in a way that makes you happy. So if you want to earn 50,000 rupees and you can live in a place where the expense is 30,000, and you want a beautiful life in nature, that's possible as well. I can tell you 15 countries right now where you can go and do that. So any kind of life is possible. So yeah, just pick your life and believe that you can make it happen, and then just go ahead and make it happen and do it with others so that it's a bit more enjoyable.
Wow, you make it sound so easy. So I'm going to ask you one final question because I think you'd be the right person to answer that. So, what are the big lookouts for the next 1 year and also the next decade? What can one expect to see unfolding?
Expect the unexpected. The world has changed. The world is changing at a pace, I've not seen in my lifetime. I think the big changes obviously are AI and the geopolitical instability. They are not going away. And they're not going away because most governments have unsustainable levels of debt. That's not going to go away. That means that taxes will continue to increase in most parts of the world. So that's an irreversible trend, unless something magical happens. And like some people predict, AI will bring such hyper productivity that things will change. Time will tell. The other thing is, the demographic decline, which is something quite, in your face when you go to a lot of countries. So you just realize the world is changing. It's not always that populations will keep growing and there'll be more opportunities. More people means growing economies. So you have to see which parts of the world have more opportunities. And actually, I think India is obviously one of the most exciting exporters of talent. So there are so many countries in the world where populations are aging, and there's so much demand for high quality talent, and India has been at the forefront of it, and I think that can continue as well. The third thing is AI, so which actually makes it even more interesting. So here we talk about demographic decline, but at the same time we say AI will ensure that not everyone has a job. So in fact, this is probably the best time for a demographic decline, because you don't need that many people to grow businesses. There are companies that are saying, big Fortune 500 companies that are saying they can double their business over the next 5 years, but they won't hire a single person. In fact, they'll continue to shrink. We have entered the phase of people-less growth. So I think some of these trends are there, but I think this is a great time for some geographical diversification. So if we broaden our horizons, if we stay alive to opportunities around the world, there are countries which do not have enough people. So there are opportunities there. You may think I'm working so hard, I can barely even afford to buy a house. What am I working for? Well, there are places in the world where you can buy a beautiful home for, a fraction of what you would be paying where you are right now. Then you may feel nobody values me. Again, there are parts of the world where you can go and where you can be valued. So find your tribe, find your community, find your place. And as I always say, no matter what happens, I am an eternal optimist, and I would like to think that no matter what changes, whether it's AI or geopolitical instability, I think there'll be opportunities, and the best is yet to come.
Wow. Absolutely razor sharp analysis coming from you, my dear friend Abhi. Thank you so much for making time and speaking with us at Common Ground today. And here's wishing you a lot of best wishes for all these adventures and future endeavors that you're going to embark on and that you've already set off on. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for the wonderful conversation. Thank you.
So, this is it for today. We'll be speaking to another interesting guest, a prominent voice from the UK India corridor at Common Ground, presented to you by me, Lakshmi Kaul, for Global Order. Stay tuned.